make work light. This one seems like more of an approach to work.
It's absolutely an approach to work. It's what they do when the burden is heavy, when it's, unrelenting demands. We find that the ordinary contributor, they carry their weight on the team. But when things are really tough, they end up adding to the burden of their colleagues or their managers. And, we all know this. Like, we all know colleagues who are talented but taxing. Like, they just make hard work harder. You're like, oh, this should be a 2-minute request, but I know it's going to be a 2-minute, warm up to like a 2-hour. Exactly. It's the people on your calendar who you dread working with versus those that you're like, we have an hour scheduled and they're probably going to tell me, hey, I've got the answer right here, like 5 minutes and we're done. They're a time rebate rather than a tax. And we find these impact players, they just make hard work lighter, and it's sometimes they lend a hand of help. Like, hey, you know what, George, I can see your swamp. What can I take off your plate? But that's only so scalable. I can't go around just taking things off other people's plates. I'll end up exhausted. It's that they're easy to work with. They're like, hey, you know what, here's a report. And I just summarized the key points. They're concise, they're direct, they don't do drama, politics. They push away the phantom work and they just focus on the real work. And it's one of my favorite things in the research is I always find something interesting. Like, they're just fun. They're just people who you enjoy working with because they can be lighthearted and laugh their way through difficult things without losing the gravitas of the moment or the work.
Yeah, that's huge. And we all want to be around people like that. And we have, luckily, a lot of those here at Ramsey. But for these small business owners listening, they're going, all right, I want to hire these types of people, Liz. What kinds of questions can I be asking in the interview process to figure out the green flags, red flags? Is this going to be an impact player?
Yeah. Well, I think you have to you can look for the behavior of the impact player and use some behavioral-based interviewing techniques. But what's most powerful is to look for the mindsets behind the behavior, because the mindsets you're looking for are people with a proactive personality, people with an outward orientation, who aren't like looking at self, their own experience. They're looking at, well, what's hard for the people around me? What's important to the people around me? And they're people who then make that important to them. So you're looking for someone with an empathetic personality. You're looking for someone with a service orientation.
Yeah.
Someone who sees their work like, I'm here to serve my client, my boss, my colleagues. And of course, in serving, they end up pretty well served by the organization. Like, you can imagine, these are people who are well recognized, well compensated.
One of the hallmarks of EntreLeadership is our 12 components of a good hire in our hiring process. And one of those is passion. Do they light up when they're talking about this role in the process? Is there a connection you found between passion and impact players?
Well, there is, and it's a little bit counterintuitive because they work with passion, but not necessarily on their passion. And I think this is a really important distinction for kind of this moment in time where a lot of people are told, hey, follow your passion and you'll never work a day in your life. And, what happens is you get people who are following their passion inside an organization, and suddenly they're following their passion. You're like, well, actually, it's not quite what we do here. And what we find is that they figure out what's important inside the organization and they make it important to them. And then they work passionately on it with energy, with conviction. And often they become passionate about the work, but they're not people who are like, hey, this is like my personal passion. Like, this is what I want to work on.
That's big.
It is. And, I have to admit, I joined the workforce like looking for a place that would let me work on what I was passionate about. And, for me, it was this job interview where the boss was like, hey, great, Liz, like, we think you're great, but actually your boss has a different problem. And what would be terrific is if you could help her solve this problem. I wanted to teach leadership. They needed someone to teach technology to a bunch of technologists around the world. And I'm like, I don't want that job. That's not the thing I care about. But like, what I could hear him saying was, Liz. I mean, he didn't really say this, but what he was implying was, Liz, look around here and figure out what's going on and what's important, what's on the critical path, and make yourself useful. And I'm like, oh, it's not the job I want, but man, that is the job that needs to be done. And I went and did it. Turned out I became passionate about it. And suddenly, opportunity after opportunity after opportunity and promotion and compensation, all these things follow because I was willing to point myself to what matters. And it's not how I entered the workforce. I fortunately got some good coaching